This is the Lord Jesus Christ, whose new name of the revelation today is Brian Leonard Golightly Marshall, announced by Pope Benedict XVI on March the 12th, 2013, and then formally in an apostolic letter released to the world on March the 26th, 2013. Now, we recently watched a documentary about a report to the North Korean government by a psychologist who was sent to Seoul, South Korea, and from there he was to make observations of the mentality of the Western influence and brainwashing indoctrination of the Zionist agenda. He reported that the three main religions practice a worship of the ancient god of hate and death. Being a communist nation, he was unaware of its own communist origin being entirely Zionist. He was wrong concerning Hitler, stating Germany killed 25 million Russians. He failed to discover the Russians under Stalin was responsible for the extermination of 60 million Russians, nor was he aware the Western world declared war on Germany, all Zionists and Jews in control of Christian nations. He failed in many areas. What the Korean government should have done is invite patriots from the West to lay it all out for them, then compare their own study to zero in on the real causes. All media and banks are Zionist. Therefore, he failed to comprehend communism and Judaism are inexplicably linked as a weapon against all righteous people, including North Korea. Now, prophecy dictates that the kingdom of God will be taken away from Israel and given to a Gentile nation. It cannot be any Western nation. Why? 1. All are of Israel and preaches Judaism from the pulpits. 2. The 10 Western nations are the tribes of Solomon, overthrown by the Assyrian army in 722 BC. 3. In an act of mercy, after the preaching of Jonah, who had convinced the king of Nineveh to repent, who released and scattered the 10 tribes, which were millions of people, who were then transported to Europe. The river Danube, named after the tribe of Dan, for example. 4. The cities and towns of Europe have the same ensigns as the 10 tribes because they brought them with them. 5. Matthew 21:43. Therefore I say unto you, the kingdom of God shall be taken from you and given to a nation bringing forth the fruits thereof. 6. All of the West is dominated by Zionism. All churches are preaching the nation of Israel, Judaism, a God of hate and death. 8. Israel that flies the Rothschild flag. The Knesset was paid for by the Rothschild dynasty. Number 9, the rumour is that from May the 24th, 2014, all European babies will be microchipped. 10. Yitzhak Kaduri, Israel's renowned scholar, a member of the true descendants of the Jews, left a written instruction for his followers. The Messiah is Jesus. He did not write was Jesus. He said the Messiah is Jesus. He said the second part of the message was not to be opened until after the death of the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ariel Sharon. The message said Jesus would be revealed after the death of Sharon. Now, Ariel Sharon died on the Christ's 70th birthday, which has just passed, Germany, January the 11th, 2014. Now, what is interesting as we're talking about the 10 tribes on the previous slide, that Germany came into existence from 300 small groups and was not of the 10 tribes. Number 12, what have we got? We've got homeless people are disappearing in Europe, Canada, and the USA. Reports state that their body organs are being harvested. They are disappearing, and a personal message from a veteran who did not want to be identified through fear of the Jews wrote that his own son had died. He was 39 years old. He was not homeless, however, he was targeted, and he'd found out that his son's body organs had been taken, harvested, and that there's a building in San Francisco, 3-story building being constructed for the express purpose of harvesting organs. Now, number 13, all throughout the Western nations have a birth certificate. All are worth millions to the owner of their straw man account. Any person who dies, the owner, and we're talking about the person that dies, meaning you, because you are not the owner of your birth certificate, the money you are worth, each one of you could be worth mega millions. A birth certificate in the USA today is worth over $7 million per baby. A newborn must be registered. The details are taken before a judge. That's the birth registration form, usually handed out by the hospital and filled out by your mothers and fathers. You as the baby, your name is called out in court. Of course, there's no answer. The baby is not present. Then the judge stamps the registration form intestate, which means dead without a will. Then the birth certificate is raised upon the intestate registration form and is issued in the all capital letters name of the child and then sold. The baby is registered by name as a corporation, that's the all capital letters. And then the straw man account, which is opened through Washington, D.C., is traded on the stock market. That birth certificate becomes a commercial bond and is traded on the stock market just like an animal. We are the stock, that's why shopping centres called stock lands, like cattle, we all go there to buy their goods, consumables that we do not need. So the original meaning of the livestock market is for us. This is what all money is based on, nothing else. So if you were the Christ, what nation would you choose? Any Western nation? No way, Jose. This eliminates China and Russia as well. Russia, as we've demonstrated our time in Hurghada, part of Sodom and Gomorrah. Women go there for sex, so do the men. Everybody's looking for sex. So the Chinese have no respect for life. In fact, body organs are sold straight out of the executed criminal. They're declared criminal by the court, condemned, and then is taken from the court into an ambulance, transported, murdered, and butchered ASAP. We had experience with a man, a wealthy man in Egypt, and he was about to fly to China for a liver transplant. Well, that didn't happen. The life of some poor Chinese prisoner was spared. Now, North Korea, from what I can find, is a nation of well-mannered, peaceful people who regard their leader as a saintly grandfather, and they are his grandchildren, a huge family of love. We know this is so as they are protected from movies, music, internet, and the materialism of the West, that they've been cut off from the West to protect them. The people occupy themselves with sport, dance, and music. Overall, tourists come away, these are tourists from the West, the small amount that go in each year, they come away with glowing reports of happy, clean, well-dressed people, lacking adequate food, however, but are separated entirely from the Western propaganda, the poisoned food and medications. So if we were to list the hundreds of nations, who would you choose as the inheritor of God? A nation that does not believe in the God of the three religions of hate and death? Personally, if the world were to adopt the North Korean society, all loving each other, I would be quite happy and leave. I did mention at one time God is love, and like Hitler said, a German cannot be a Christian and a German because God is within the German people. Perhaps if the Korean investigator had all the truth, he would recognize the North Koreans echo Hitler's Germany. They have no idea the truth about Hitler. There was no Holocaust. Hitler was a man of love for his people and advanced thought when he said unless Judaism was stopped, the earth would be left a lifeless orb floating in the ether of space. That was Judaism and Marxism. But Marxism is a product of Judaism, so. Has this not come to pass? The Fukushima nuclear plants are spewing nuclear waste and poisoned ocean currents killing all life. The clouds drifting to the west coast of the Americas. Now, there is no way we can convince the nation of North Korea I favour them as an example of what God is. They would regard me as a dangerous lunatic, as they are convinced there is no God, especially a God that allows the abominations to rule the earth. The gods of the religions are not my God, nor is it me. I can assume with confidence, after all, I have not made any headway in the Western Rothschild nations, but I still win with only one leader, Pope Benedict XVI, recognizing me as Christ. As for the North Koreans being communists, their leader would regard me as mentally ill. So what is a man? What has he got, if not himself, to say the things he truly feels of one who kneels? I, at least, did it my way. That's life. That's what all the people say. But I know I am going to change that tune. Many times I have thought of cutting out, but my heart just won't buy it. I'm listening to Frank Sinatra at the moment. That was Yah this afternoon. Now, there is a 5-hour documentary on the YouTube that we suggest you download. It is called The Synagogue of Satan, full documentary, 1878 to 2006. North Korea has been devoured by the Rothschild and are unaware of it, and unaware that God has chosen Germany as the greatest nation and, in fact, won the war. Communism was a Rothschild invention. As for Darwin, the evolution of man from a rock where life somehow began, or a new twist, the Anunnaki. We are from the seed of aliens who came to the earth to develop slaves to mine gold. I must pause for a moment. It is so stupid. Wait for it. So they could take the gold back to their home planet to sprinkle it into the atmosphere and save their planet. Give me a break. Oh yes, that answers the life on Earth question, our origin. They must have evolved from a rock. Or were they planted by higher aliens who raised them up to mine gold? Perhaps still further back, they evolved from a rock. Now, it has been rumoured, if I said this before, then hear it again, it has been rumoured that all babies born in Europe will be microchipped starting May 24th, 2014. If this is true, then the revealing of the Jesus Messiah will be made after this date, according to Ron Wyatt, the discoverer of the Ark of the Covenant, in what was called Jeremiah's Grotto. The facts are strange to say the least. Generally speaking, the Old Testament is bizarre, with the Lord speaking constantly, demanding obedience, ordering the murder of neighbouring tribes to slay all males, yet keep the virgins or women who have not had sex for themselves. Psychopath God was and is Lucifer then and now. As I said in the Gospels, they are of their father, the devil, a murderer from the beginning, a reference to Cain. That was from John 8:44. Keep in mind these ancient stories are parables which at the time were reality for the populace who believed the Cain story as a fact rather than a way of imparting an idea. As I said, all things were told in parables to stop the evil one's understanding and being able to get into heaven. A parable is in Hebrew the word mashal, my name, not saying the message in straight talk. So a parable was, it is like this. Now, the Christ has just handed me a bit of a note here about Fukushima, which the whole world is very concerned about, rightly so. There's a giant magnetic sphere is coming in from the south. Iron dust bonds to the radiations, the nuclear plutonium, and will clear the earth of nuclear pollution. The iron bonded to the plutonium will be drawn out into space. Good news. Where are we? Oh, moving right along to Moses. Okay, so Moses did not talk to God. Moses had an angel called Lucifer give him the 10 Commandments. Lucifer led the Israelite out of Egypt, crossed the Red Sea and led them, that should be crossed the desert to the Red Sea, and led them to become trapped, facing death and captivity. Then the miracle, and the Red Sea parted. This was God's doing, capital G, to save them, the Israelites, from the Egyptians. So for the next 40 years, Lucifer is barking orders at them, and they were prevented by God, big G, from going into Palestine. They were not worthy. That's the whole point. Moses knew it. Yet when you read the script, suddenly it switches after the death of Moses. It's the writers, the scribes, have to pervert everything. So the 10 Commandments were in the Ark of the Covenant, which ended up under the cross in what is known, it's a cave called Jeremiah's Grotto. It's right underneath the cross. Ron Wyatt found it on January the 6th, 1982, when the Christ was 1982 weeks old. Ron Wyatt said there were 4 angels which spoke to him, telling him to take the 10 Commandments out and put them aside on a shelf. Why? They were not of God. As Jesus, I said, there are 2 commandments, love God and love each other. Now, borrowing from the 10 are the 7 that the Jews who practice the Noahide laws bandy around that sound very similar to the 10 Commandments. So that tells you right there, it wasn't God, it wasn't Jesus giving it or talking to Moses. It was an infiltration, if you like, just like Lucifer was talking to the self-appointed Apostle Paul. He did not have a conversion on the road to Damascus. It was Lucifer who fronted up, if he appeared at all, and it ended up being an infiltration. So what have we got? Back to Moses. Obviously, this fallen angel who spoke to Moses was determined to control the world, knowing that in the end time, it would have the Torah to confuse and have the false Jews emerge as the self-chosen people, when in reality they are not of the genetics of Shem, and being all liars are of Cain. They become the self-appointed Semite. It's their anti-Semitic tag that they apply to anybody who questions them It's their trick. They pull it out all the time. They are liars. And they know it. And they think the world of Christianity is so stupid. The rule of thumb is they must lie, and whatever they say is a lie. So you have to reverse everything that they say. Now this is the same documentary. The best documentary we have watched is the one mentioned earlier on the YouTube called The Synagogue of Satan, full documentary from, that should be 1878 to 2006 by A.C. Hitchcock. It is a relentless exposure of Zionist Rothschilds and reveals the depths of evils that these Jews have done. Now, I have often been asked what the 666 means and who is it that is the number of the man. Most will say it is the Pope, as the title in Latin, Vicar of Christ, the numbers add up to 666. But this is not the number of a man. It is that 666 refers to the title of an office that is held, not the number of a man. The man is Rothschild. It is obvious, considering no man will know the name of God, only he can reveal it. It is then necessary to look closely at the address where I was reborn to. It is for a reason, as is everything about my rebirth hour and location, to do with the revealing of all things. 105 is the house number and is eagle in Greek. It also means angel. The angel is Michael, as the angel comes to the earth and opens the bottomless pit. The angel Michael is revealed by the Garvin Institute, which covertly took blood from me. It was taken after I returned to Australia in 1996. The secretary for Professor Phillips talked to me for 2 days from Sydney. I was in Melbourne. She said my blood had in it 3 unusual chromosomes, numbered 3, 4, and 13. I explained to her it is the name Michael in the Greek concordance. That's 3413. The measure of the angel is another reference, as the angel comes to the earth, opens the bottomless pit, and with it has a golden chain. Opening the pit lets out its beast, who is Pope Francis, the Antichrist. And he is bound up along with its hordes and cast back into the pit. The name of the avenue I was reborn to is the name of the 666, Rothschild, in the suburb of Rosebery. It was the daughter of a Rothschild who married Lord Rosebery, who then became Prime Minister of England, all financed by the Rothschild family. The distance from that home at 105 Rothschild Avenue to the South Pole is 3875 miles. This number in the concordance is Comforter, who will teach you all things and will abide with you forever. It's the Jesus prophecy. This was a reference to God sending the Comforter. Another verse, if I do not go, I cannot send the Comforter. Or another God cannot send the Comforter. The names point to Rothschild and Comforter reborn into the pit of hell, and Michael being the angel. As the angel word is also eagle, we can measure from the end of Rothschild Avenue. There is a T intersection named Harcourt Parade. So we follow the prompts to the small city in Victoria, small town, how many? 496 or something. We moved there in 2009 after myself, Martha, or Ash, me. We'd taken the H1N1 flying slough. Oh, God. It's late at night, guys. H1N1 swine flu cure, which was colloidal silver, we took it to Central Australia to show the Aboriginals how to cure and protect themselves. So we set up drums and they were making wells of living water. We established several locations and, as expected, were tailed by the South Australian police. And then we went into the, what was it, or where was the?
Police station.
Police station, yes. Augusta, what was the name of?
Port Augusta.
Port Augusta. Augusta?
Mm.
We go to the police station there. What a press charges.
The Queen of genocide.
We accused the Queen, Elizabeth II, of genocide. So returning to Harcourt, we found a small road named Eagles Road. Now, measuring from Eagles Road, both ends, measuring to 105 Rothschild Avenue and back, the distance is 888 miles. 888 is Jesus in Greek gematria. Now, the Rothschild flag is a satanic hexagram, originally known as a shield of blood, Rothschild in German, and hung outside the money changer shop of Rothschild in Hamburg. The two blue lines, one at the top and bottom, represent the Euphrates and Nile rivers, and this is why the stolen land between the two is the target. In this image, the bee is featured at the center. The queen owns all beehives. She is the queen of the Zionists. Now, in Isaiah 7:18 is the reference of the bee, and it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall hiss for the fly that is in the uttermost part of the rivers of Egypt, and for the bee that is in the rivers of Assyria. Greek 718 is to woo, as in espousal for marriage. What does this lunacy mean? The bee is in Syria and is why they, the Jews, are causing the war against it. The fly in Egypt sits on the dead carcass. Egypt has already fallen to the Zionist world media, destroying its economy, rumours of wars. We were there, and it's all propaganda perpetuated after a brief uprising. But the stress saw a Mossad agent, General El-Sisi, come to power to quell the uprising.
Millions of tons of garbage covered in flies.
Oh yes, Cairo, man. Well, there's flies everywhere, garbage everywhere, all around the Giza Plateau, carcasses of camels and donkeys, horses, and then all through Cairo. It's a garbage dump. And then, of course, we go to the Zabaleen community, who are the garbage collectors, and they have a marvellous church that they've built out of what was a grotto. It's now a church in their cave that can house 20,000 people. But, of course, they are so deluded that they rejected the Christ in the flesh as expected. Okay, again, what does this lunacy mean? We've got six-sided pentagram, the imprint of the hoof of the devil, a goat's hind legs with a man cross female body with the head of a goat. It's the Freemason Baphomet. It also represents Saturn in ancient literature. King Solomon received 666 talents of gold per annum from his Moabite and Ammonite wives. These descended from the daughters via incest with Lot from Sodom. You can read about it, 1 Kings 10:14 and 2 Chronicles 9:13. The book of Revelation 13:18, almost 1,000 years later, predicts who Solomon would reincarnate as. The pentagram is found on medallions with the hexagram on the reverse. The pentagram represents Venus aligned with Saturn on particular days. The 6-Day War was set up from June the 5th, 1967. This is when Israel and Lebanon, wasn't it?
No, it took East Jerusalem.
Oh, okay.
Dead Sea Scrolls.
Oh, all right. This is all about the Dead Sea Scrolls taking East Jerusalem, the 6-Day War.
Which is along the Jordan.
Okay. Right. So the 6-Day War was set up from June the 5th, 1967, which was the Christ's grandfather's birth date. His name was Francis Aloysius Golightly. He was born in 1881. That date, the same date, June the 5th, the distance between Saturn and Venus on the opposite sides of the sun was 10.18 AU. 1018 in Greek is brabeo, to govern, to rule, an award of arbitration, a prize in the public games. That's about the way they operate. Saturn, 9.48 astronomical units from the sun in Greek, bedlasso, is abominable, detestable. It's exactly what Israel is. Then we've got the butcher of Beirut, Ariel Sharon. He died 11th of January, just days ago, the 70th birthday of the Christ. The distance between Saturn and Venus was the same, 10.18. This monster bragged about killing 750 Palestinians in one go. Even children were raped and tortured by his soldiers. As the Talmud states, a Gentile deserves death and are the slaves of Jews. Another date, Saturn and Venus, was the bombing of the King David Hotel by Israel, who of course blamed the Arabs. That was July 22nd, 1946. The distance to the sun from Saturn was 9.07 astronomical units. The Hebrew word for bad, liar, meaning a brag or a lie. Then from 908 to feign, devise, invent, and that's exactly what they did. The distance to Venus from Saturn was 9.22 astronomical units, meaning in Hebrew emptiness, a void, an undistinguishable ruin, which you can imagine what the hotel looked like after Israel blew it up. The Jews have no idea that their abominations are not forgotten. The days are fast approaching when they will have to face judgment. Mine. Here's the talisman of Saturn, the obverse and the reverse sides of the coin, if you like. So my return to the earth as a child, prophesied by Isaiah 9:6 and Isaiah 11:1, a baby will lead them, or a small child will lead them. On the day and the hour I returned to the earth, it was during the darkest hours of World War II. It was January 11th, 1944 at 2:22 a.m. The same number in the previous slide, 9.22 astronomical units. Saturn and Venus were 9.22. However, in between this time is the Earth, which is a sign that the light has come. 9.22 is found only in Genesis and means undistinguishable ruin, emptiness, void. And that was certainly the world, Europe, by the end of World War II. Here is the program showing the distances between Saturn and Venus on that date. The rebirth date of the Christ, January the 11th, 1944. So you've got the three planets are lined up. A line passes through the Earth with the absolute message, 9.22 astronomical units to Venus from Saturn. And then Saturn to the Earth, 8.15 AU. It means a grove in Hebrew, and without children in Greek. 1.09 or 109 to Venus in Hebrew is to grieve. What is interesting here is that 8.15 AU is just a short distance away from 8.13, and 8.13 in Hebrew is Ashkenaz, which is what this is all about. Here we go, Hebrew Dictionary 922. an undistinguishable ruin, emptiness, void of righteousness. Greek Dictionary 9:22, probably from the same as 9:39, through the notion of going down to the earth, a load, abundance, authority, burdensome, weight, which is what it has been for you, hasn't it? Mm-hmm. Imagine the burden for the Christ it's been all of his life, even from a child. In Genesis 1:2, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw the light that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. So Jesus' second coming divides the light from the darkness. Now, moving along to the future, July 27th, 2014, is a cross. Earth and Jupiter, 6.28 astronomical units, and Venus-Saturn, 10.61. Add the two together for 16.89. In Greek is to discern clearly, behold, gaze up, look upon, see. The combined distance, 10.61, in Greek means espoused, to give in marriage, and in Hebrew means to burst the womb, first fruit. 628 in Greek, from 575 and 3068, to wash fully. Hebrew 628, by reduplication from together. That is a promiscuous assemblage of people. Now, as a reminder, the following is a list of Ashkenazi Jew. They are the Jews who call themselves Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. Ariel Sharon's crimes against humanity. So Sharon began his military career at a young age when he became involved in fighting with the Israeli Haganah, leading commando units specializing in behind-the-lines raids and forcing Palestinians to flee their homes. In August 1953, Sharon founded and led the infamous Unit 101, which carried out a series of terror raids across the Israeli borders into refugee camps, villages, and Bedouin encampments. In September 1953, he led the Unit 101 in an attack on Bedouins in demilitarized Al-Ujah, a 145 square kilometre juncture at the western Negev-Sinai frontier, killing an unknown number. October 14th, 1953, Sharon led Unit 101 into an attack on the village of Qibya in Jordan. Under his command, Israeli soldiers moved about in the village, blowing up buildings, firing into doorways and windows with automatic weapons and throwing hand grenades, killing 69 civilians, mostly women and children. He later claimed he believed that the demolished houses had been empty of inhabitants, but according to the UN observer who inspected the scene, one story was repeated time after time. The bullet splintered door, the body sprawled across the threshold, indicating that the inhabitants had been forced by heavy fire to stay inside until their homes were blown up over them. It's the one thing about the Israelis, they are such cowards. In 1971, the pacification of Gaza. Under the euphemistic title, The Pacification of Gaza, Sharon imposed a brutal policy of repression, blowing up houses, bulldozing large tracts of refugee camps, imposing severe collective punishments and imprisoning hundreds of young Palestinians. Numerous civilians were killed or unjustly imprisoned, their houses demolished, and the whole area was effectively transformed into a jail. In 1977, the Likud party won the general election under Begin. Sharon joined Begin's first administration as Minister of Agriculture in charge of settlements, an avid supporter of the religious Gush Emunim movement. He was one of the main facilitators of a settlement boom aimed in part at preventing the establishment of a Palestinian state in the occupied territories. In 1982, Peace for the Galilee, as Defence Minister Sharon masterminded the 1982 Israeli invasion of Lebanon, which he dubbed the Peace for Galilee. In all, this operation killed many thousands of civilians and rendered nearly 500,000 homeless. On June the 5th, 1982, he sent tens of thousands of Israeli soldiers across the border to fight their way up the Lebanese coast. They eventually occupied Beirut. Heavy Israeli sea, air and land bombardment devastated a substantial portion of Lebanon. By the end of July, the Lebanese government stated that at least 14,000 people had been killed, over 90% of whom were unarmed, of course, civilians, and twice that number seriously wounded. August the 12th became known as Black Thursday after a massive artillery barrage lasting some 11 hours, killing some 500 Lebanese and Palestinian civilians. September 15th, 1982, after the evacuation of PLO fighters from Beirut, on the condition of international protection for the Palestinian and Lebanese civilians in the region, Sharon invaded Beirut, Sharon declaring that this was in order to dislodge 2,000 Palestinian fighters remaining in the city. The task of purging the camps Sharon gave to the Phalange, it's a Lebanese force armed by and closely allied with Israel since the onset of Lebanon's civil war in 1975. Sabra and Shatila. The slaughter in the camps at Sabra and Shatila took place between 6 p.m. on September 16 and 8 a.m. on September 18, 1982. In an area under the control of the Israeli army. Sharon's troops, having held the camps under siege, allowed phalangists to enter. Israeli searchlights illuminated the camps, while Israeli army personnel watched through binoculars as the death squads spread unchallenged through the camps. Whole families were murdered. Many were raped and tortured before being killed. So many bodies were heaped into lorries and taken away or buried in mass graves that the exact toll will never be known. But Palestinian sources estimated at least 2,000 people were killed. Then on September 28, 2000, Ariel Sharon's incursion into Al-Aqsa sanctuary, accompanied by at least 1,000 armed soldiers and police officers, triggered the outbreak of the current crisis that has so far led to the deaths of hundreds of Palestinians and wounding thousands. Now today, most people wrongly believe that the big lie was a propaganda technique Hitler created and used to trick the masses of Germany. In actuality, Hitler wrote that the Jews were the creators and masters of telling the big lie. Hitler wrote in Mein Kampf, quoting, "But it remained for the Jews, with their unqualified capacity for falsehood, and their fighting comrades, the Marxists." All this was inspired by the principle, which is quite true in itself, that in the big lie there is always a certain force of credibility, because the broad masses of a nation are always more easily corrupted in the deeper strata of their emotional nature than consciously or voluntarily, and thus in the primitive simplicity of their minds, they more readily fall victims to the big lie than the small lie, since they themselves often tell small lies in little matters, but would be ashamed to resort to a large-scale falsehoods. It would never come into their heads to fabricate colossal untruths, and they would not believe that others could have the impudence to distort the truth so infamously. Even though the facts which prove this to be so may be brought clearly to their minds, they will still doubt and waver, and will continue to think that there may be some other explanation. For the grossly impudent lie always leaves traces behind it, even after it has been nailed down, a fact which is known to all expert liars in this world and to all who conspire together in the art of lying. These people know only too well how to use falsehood for the basest purposes. From time immemorial, however, the Jews have known better than any others how falsehood and calumny can be exploited. Is not their very existence founded on one great lie, namely that they are a religious community, whereas in reality they are a race? And what a race! One of the greatest thinkers that mankind has produced has branded the Jews for all time with a statement which is profoundly and exactly true. He, Schopenhauer, called the Jew the great master of lies. Those who do not realize the truth of that statement, or do not wish to believe it, will never be able to lend a hand in helping truth to prevail. This is a famous quote, the words of the now dead Beirut butcher, Ariel Sharon. He is not resting in peace. He is in a hell 1,000-fold worse than what he has created for every victim of his lying violence. Quoting, I vow that if I was just an Israeli citizen and I met a Palestinian, I would burn him and I would make him suffer before killing him. With one hit, I've killed 750 Palestinians. That was Rafah in 1956. I wanted to encourage my soldiers by raping Arabic girls, as the Palestinian woman is a slave for Jews, and we do whatever we want to her, and nobody tells us what we shall do, but we tell others what they shall do. It was Ariel Sharon in an interview with General Oz Merhem, 1956. Another famous Hitler truth. It is necessary that I should die for my people, but my spirit will rise from the grave, and the world will know that I was right. Other famous words by that other famous man sitting beside me, all grown up. Jesus, quoting John 8:44, ye are of your father the devil. The lusts of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is not truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. Then the Revelation 2:9, I know thy works and thy tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. So the mark of the beast is the flag of Israel, the Rothschild family emblem, if you like, the red shield, the 666. What has come to light in these exposures is that John Paul II of Poland, his mother, was a Jew, which makes John Paul II a Jew who infiltrated the Vatican. Indeed, he opened the door wider for every foul thing to occupy the church that the Christ would return to. On the day of John Paul II's election through the conclave, the sunlight for Rome, it was October the 15th, 19 78, it was 666 minutes.